Thank you all for coming out today, and those who came through and greeted the family and the loved ones and had to leave. We apologize for those who have sat through for 4 hours now as we started the luncheon after our private service at the funeral home. I want to thank the funeral home for a fantastic job. They've been personal friends of the family for years, and once again they came through with flying colors. Our minister for our service this morning, who is here to say an opening prayer for us for this service this afternoon, was Curt's pastor and our pastor for all the formative years of our children. We live in Aston, in Woodbrook. He was the pastor and still is the pastor of St. Timothy's Lutheran Church. And so all of our children attended St. Timothy's Sunday School, went to the church services, the youth programs, were baptized, and went through the process of understanding the importance of religion in their lives, led by the individual who's going to give us our opening prayer. And so I welcome again to our presence in honor of Curt, Pastor Steve Booker.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to say to the Weldon family before we have our prayer that I'd like to express my sympathy to them and the sympathy of our church to their family. It's a very difficult time for them, and Curt was a beloved child, a beloved person to so many people in the world. His death is tragic, but his life is one to be celebrated and given thanks to God for, and that will happen this afternoon. So let us pray to God, who loves Curt, who set him among his family and among us, and now cares for Curt in everlasting life. Let us pray. O God of grace and glory, we remember before you today our brother Curt. We thank you for giving him to us to know and to love as a companion in our pilgrimage on the earth. In your boundless compassion, console us who mourn. Give us faith to see that death has been swallowed up in the victory of our Lord Jesus Christ, so that we may live in confidence and hope until by your call we are gathered to our heavenly home in the company of all your saints. We pray this through Jesus Christ, our Savior and Lord. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor. The speeches today will be brief, and they'll be from the family. And if anyone in the audience wishes to say a few words, you'll be welcome to do so as well. The program was designed by the children. They laid it out. They decided. My only input was, in honor of Curt's love of sports, I asked them to put the schedules for the Flyers and the Eagles on the back cover, because sports was Curt's passion, and you'll hear that in my comments today. We've also included for you a little card that indicates a YouTube link that you can get onto when you go home. If you know our family, one of our traditions has been model trains. It started when I was the youngest of 9, and our parents didn't have much in a row home in Marcus Hook where 4 bedrooms held 11 people. But we, at every Christmas time each year, our father took time to put up a platform, a 4x8 slab of plywood, either in the living room or in the dining room. And I can remember my mother saying, "Steve, you can't put that platform in the living room because we have no place to sit." And so it would end up in the dining room, and we would all help out with the trains, which became a tradition. It continued with my family and our family, and from the time the girls were young, they would go to bed on Christmas Eve with a slab of wood, and when they woke up in the morning, the platform was completed, the houses were lighted, and the decorations were up, assumedly by Santa Claus. And that tradition has continued. And so last January, Kristen and John decided they would hire a videographer who's here today to take photographs of the trains so that we could put it on YouTube. And they did that about 12 minutes long, and they said, now you've got to do a narration. Well, I never did it until 2 days ago. So I did the narration in honor of Curt and his son Bennett, who was my chief engineer. And the YouTube link that you now have will be up there forever as a tribute to our son, to Bennett's father, and to Bennett. And hopefully will convey the kind of family spirit that we've had throughout our lives, which continues to this day in the lives of our other family members. This program today is basically the children and the parents of Curt Jr. And our first speaker is going to be my wife, Curt's mother, and the mother of our children, and the rock of the family, that registered nurse who runs the diabetes program at Crozier, Mary Weldon.
I wrote things down very crudely on paper because I don't have Microsoft Word on my computer. Children are not supposed to die before their parents. We've all heard that. When we lose a parent, we lose the past. But when you lose a child, you lose the future. Curt was a happy child growing up with all his siblings, his older sister, Karen, Kristen, Kimmy, always telling him what to do, and then Andrew being told by Curt what to do as he got older. He went through St. James Preschool. Aston was great for them growing up. He went through St. James Preschool right down the road, then further down the road into Northley, or Pennell on 452, then Northley Middle School right down the road from here. He participated, as did Andrew, in every seasonal sport that was offered. Also, in addition to the sports, he was in double D gymnastics and also karate, more things that they were always involved in. A parent is supposed to keep their children safe. They're supposed to protect them from harm, make it all better when they are hurting. The child part was the easy part. Looking back, it was. The adult part was the hard part for me. It was impossible in the long term. When I officially got notified, although I had suspected it for a couple days, that something was wrong, but my husband called me. He was overseas over the phone because the police wouldn't tell me anything over the phone. I had to wait to hear from my husband. His words were, "Curt's dead." It was just right out there, a shock. But in the end, it wasn't surprising. I was angry. I was angry at myself. Why didn't I do more for him? Why didn't I call him more? Why didn't I check in on him more? Why didn't I do more things? I wanted to know, how did this happen? Where did it happen? When did it happen? Mostly, why did this happen? Now, knowing all these things doesn't change anything. At the end of the day, he's gone forever. He's gone forever physically, but not emotionally in my heart. He will live on in his son Bennett, in his memory, and in his mom, Bennett's mom, Katie. And I have a little poem that I came across. 1,000 words won't bring you back. I know because I tried. Neither will 1,000 tears. I know because I've cried. And I want to thank all my kids, Karen, Kristen, Kimmy, Andrew, Rick, John, Mike, Amy, all of you. You've been so helpful throughout this whole ordeal. I don't know what I would have done without you guys, really. I also want to say thank you to Carmela, who's done so much for us through the funeral home. I, again, don't know what I would have done without her. She was an angel. For her to be able to do the job that she does, and her father as well. And I thank my coworkers that came to see me, they called me, they texted me, all the people that sent us food, Penny, Jimmy, Beth, Will. I don't want to leave anybody out, but you know who you are. You called Michael, my brother, Jackie, his wife, my mom, at her age, making cakes and cookies and sending them up. So, and the condolences on the website. I read them, I've been reading them day in and day out, every day. It means a lot to read those nice things that people say. So thank you all for coming.
Curt's oldest sister, Karen, is the mainstay of the children because she is the oldest. And Karen and Rick were very much involved while I was overseas when the call came in. For the first few days I could not get back, and they went over and with Mary began the process of the preparations. Karen's going to speak, and then I assume right after, Rick, Karen's husband, and she will play a music selection as a tribute to Curt.
Thank you, everybody. The love has been overwhelming and really helped. Thank you very much. 7 years' time separates me from my brother Curt. As I entered college, Curt was 11 years old, and so as a consequence of my own life timeline, I missed out on Curt's formative years. And that's not to say that I don't have memories of him, growing up with him. They're just memories that are like split in two, childhood, preteen, and then adult. Hold on, this isn't my phone. No, that one. I remember Curt playing shuffleboard in nothing but his underwear in Florida when we went to Disney World, tighty whities. And on the same trip, I secretly consumed at least 6 full-size Three Musketeer bars from the resort vending machine over the course of a day and a half, scrounging every quarter I could find to empty that vending machine. Item number E4. I remember him lugging the largest bag ever full of hockey equipment. I was a Flyers fan too back then, and I had the privilege of going to a game with my dad and brothers as the guests of Mr. Snyder. We had a special meal in the Flyers executive conference room at the Spectrum, and then after the game, I experienced what I now realize was gender discrimination when I was prohibited from entering the players' locker room while Curt and Andrew got to go in. If I only knew, I would have argued. I think of how I probably showed Andrew a little more love and how that probably negatively affected Curt when he was little. I loved you too, little brother, and Curt, and I think you knew that. I remember going to Curt's concert with the Antics. They performed at a church, and there was a huge crowd, and I loved that he was up there playing trumpet like a badass, and I felt incredibly proud, maybe even jealous of him. I think of how I waffled back and forth on how best to support him in his adult years. I went to some family meetings, and I even went with him to a meeting. I believed and tried to support the tough love mantra and encouraged my parents to do it too. You know, that idea that until the arbitrary bottom hits that human in the face, they won't change. And for some people that apparently works, and for others the arbitrary bottom is high-speed entropy right on out of this life. I'll remember my brother as tough on the outside, but really a fragile person who struggled to keep up appearances so he could try to get back on track and be there for Bennett. I'll remember how we would have conversations about life, letting go of anger, seeking out positive life experiences to reinforce a healthy mind and body. Our last conversation was on July 30th. We talked for almost 30 minutes. I called him after he posted on social media that his friend passed away from a drug overdose. I was worried about him. He assured me he was not using and was okay. We tried out the video phone feature at his behest, and I got to see him. And I chastised him for drinking a Coca-Cola and being on the phone while driving. But I did tell him that I loved him. I repeatedly remind myself of the beauty that is before me, especially when I'm experiencing something sad. And I see beauty in Curt's life and in his death. His beautiful child Bennett, representing renewal and innocence, the love he expressed and had for friends and his family, and the beauty of his final freedom from the bent wheel of life. In honor of Curt and all the beauty, especially in his love of music and hopeful spirit, Rick, my husband, and I decided to play our first duet together as a tribute to Hope at the End of the Rainbow.
Our second daughter, also an Archmere graduate like Karen, chose to become, Karen's a musician and master's degree, now going for a degree in organic foods and nutrition. Kristen is our attorney and baker. Very proud of her, as we are all of our children.
Thank you all for being here. When Curt was born, I was really excited to finally have a brother. He was a big, adorable baby, and I loved him. As a baby, he loved the American flag, and he always would call them D-Dots. And whenever he saw one, he would shout, "Dee-da, Dee-da," over and over again. And then we finally figured out it was the flag. He also loved going to the car wash, and he called that with Andrew the Whippins and the Weldons. He asked to go there all the time, so my parents always had a clean car. Curt was big as a baby, and he kept right on growing. It wasn't long before he was much bigger than me. He loved sports, especially ice hockey, and his size served him well in that sport. He excelled at it. And when he played, I imagine he envisioned himself playing as one of the Flyers, because that was his favorite team. And I remember one thing he would do before every game he had, he would say, "Oh, I hope, some people hope for a win." Curt would say, "I hope there's a bench clear tonight." And for anybody who doesn't know what that is, that's where all the players from both sides crowd the ice and have a big fight. He always would say that. So, little did Curt know that every time he was wishing for the bench clear, I was secretly wishing against it. There wouldn't be one, because I never wanted him to get hurt. Thinking back on Curt, one thing that really stands out to me is that he always believed in me. When he looked at me, I truly believe he saw someone that he thought could do anything. And that's a very rare thing, to be able to set aside your own shortcomings, your own ego, your own insecurities, and to only see the best in that other person. Most people are not capable of doing that, but Curt was. Thank you.
Our third daughter, equally successful in business and mother, and was a stalwart in helping put the program together. She actually did the entire program. And at the end, we'll do a 10-minute video presentation that she prepared, which I haven't seen yet because they told me it would be very emotional, so I haven't watched it. I'll see it for the first time with you. Is our daughter Kim Pearson.
Thank you all for being here. I had a hard time gathering words for today. Nothing seems appropriate, nothing seems honest enough to convey what is in my heart. But Curt was a lot like me in some ways. We both like to experiment with boundaries. Growing up as the children of an elected official meant a lot of unwanted attention and visibility. And kids who are not mature enough to handle that sort of attention can manipulate it pretty easily, and we surely did. Whether it was the way we dressed, the music we listened to, the friends we kept, we had no qualms about trying something edgy to make a statement or to get attention. With 5 of us running around, it was pretty easy to live on the fringes because at some point there aren't enough hands to grab you and pull you back from the edge. Curt Vonnegut said it very well. He said, "I want to stand as close to the edge as I can without going over. Out on the edge, you see all kinds of things you can't see from the center." And that's the tricky thing about life. It's so very easy to make the wrong decision and screw everything up. And the irony is that there is no way to predict how devastating an impact a single decision can have. And the tragedy is it's really just that simple. It takes very little effort. Once you begin knocking the dominoes down, stopping that progression is nearly impossible. And I wish I could go back to when we were very little, when we tried to get Curt to eat bugs at the beach house in Rehoboth, when we sat around on the weekends watching Nickelodeon or the Monkees, or you can't do that on television, swimming in the summer, playing with the neighborhood kids on Weathervane, raking leaves in the fall with Dad, trying to help Mom light the fireplace as fall turned to winter, helping to get the house ready for holidays like Halloween and Thanksgiving, and picking out a tree and waiting for Christmas Eve to decorate it. Christmas morning, mountains of wrapping paper, followed by a steady stream of family and visitors through the day. When we were innocent and still perfect little children ready to launch into life. We were lucky to have Curt with us for 35 years, and in his 35 years, he experienced more of this world than many get to experience in a lifetime. We traveled all over the country and the world. We had the privilege of meeting many exceptional thinkers and doers, both political and humanitarian. But we laughed a lot at inappropriate things and at inappropriate times. I can remember vividly an episode of complete chaos at a certain ambassador's home. We were having a very nice dinner involving some sort of cream spinach. I also remember a very shocking experience of the whole family, Mom included, getting nearly day drunk in Russia while visiting a religious site. None of us set out for that at the start of the day, but you spend a week in cramped quarters with 11 of your immediate and extended family members in Russia in the winter, eating pickled everything. The alcohol was welcome on that trip. And we're not a drinking family, for those of you who really know us. I'm sure we drove our parents mad and embarrassed them more times than they can count, but we had a lot of fun. And it's those memories that I'll hold in my heart as we go on with the days ahead. Curt Vonnegut also said, laughter and tears are both responses to frustration and exhaustion. I myself prefer to laugh, since there is less cleaning up to do afterward. I too prefer to keep the smiling moments and leave behind ones filled with tears. I'd like to leave you with one final thought. I spent a lot of time in the past weeks going over Curt's social media, and in particular his Facebook, looking for memories, for answers, and really just searching for him. When you can see a person's life laid out in a timeline, however manufactured it may have been, because we all know our social media identities are manufactured of some sort, you can see patterns and cycles, and I could feel Curt's cycles between stability and instability with each passing year. At times it's subtle, at other times not so subtle, but in the end, I do not believe that he was simply going in a circle, nor even in a downward spiral. Hermann Hesse's Siddhartha said it. In life, we are not going in circles, we're going upwards. The path is a spiral. We've already climbed many steps. Curt climbed his last steps just a little while ago, and I hope and pray that he has finally found peace. So Curtie, I'll be seeing you. Not for a little while, but I will see you again.
Thank you, Kim. Curt's younger brother and the youngest of the family, and probably the orneriest in the family, is Andrew. Very successful as well. Andrew Weldon.
Hello, everyone. My name is Andrew Weldon, and I'm Curt's little brother. If you lived in the vicinity of Weathervane Road, Lamppost Lane, or Woodbrook Way roughly 20 years ago, you may remember Curt, a bunch of other asking kids, and me running through your backyards and climbing your fences. We were playing capture. It was a very important game, and I apologize if we trampled on your French marigolds. I always looked up to Curt, both physically and in popularity. Curt had a lot of friends, was great at sports, and could always make you laugh. I remember this one time, we both went to Northley, and I was still in my awkward preteen years, and wasn't wearing deodorant yet, but probably should have been, and Curt knew this. So when we were on the bus to school one day, he asked loud enough for everyone to hear, "Hey Andrew, what kind of deodorant do you wear?" Needless to say, everyone laughed, and I was thoroughly embarrassed. But looking back on it, it's pretty damn funny. I can also remember when I first met one of my good friends. Curt knew him before I did, and introduced us to each other over the phone. But prior to that, he told my friend, who happened to be a Pez connoisseur, Pez dispensers, to try to convince me that there was a Lando Calrissian Pez dispenser, which doesn't exist. Because I love Star Wars and collected Pez dispensers. I was again the butt of the joke. Having a big brother who was 6 foot tall and 160 pounds at the age of 13 did have its benefits though. Especially when we were going through Pell and Northley, because most of the kids knew he was my brother, and I attributed his opposing stature to why I made it out of there in one piece, being the smartass I once was, and no longer am. Curt and I got into our share of trouble together too. I fondly remember summer days at home with Curt, watching Channel 67, The Box, and repeatedly calling up and ordering the song Winona's Big Brown Beaver by Primus. If you haven't seen the music video, I highly recommend it. At $1.99 per song, it's needless to say that my dad wasn't very happy when he got the phone bill that month. I remember another time my family went out to San Diego for a convention, and Curt and I were about 15 and 13 at the time. Purchased $1.46 of dynamite in Tijuana, Mexico, with visions of blowing up God knows what back home and successfully smuggling it over the border, unbeknownst to anybody but us. But getting busted when we were packing up to go home, thanks a lot, Mom and Dad. We had each other's backs. Like I said earlier, I looked up to Curt. I wanted to do what he did, dress the way he did, and be a part of his life. When he started playing ice hockey, I wanted to as well. Curt was a great player. I, on the other hand, was not. I can't remember specific stats, but I know he was a leading scorer on the Vanguards, while I led the Vanguards in penalty minutes. It wasn't just ice hockey that he was good at, though. He was a great pitcher on the Yankees and Brewers here in Aston Valley, on Archmere's varsity baseball team, and he was great at soccer. The pattern of looking up to my brother continued through high school when he was in the band The Antics, who were really popular in the punk and ska scenes in the Philly area. And even though on the outside he sometimes made it seem like he didn't want his dorky little brother around, I know he always appreciated me coming to their shows and watching him play. I went to almost all of them. Curt had a big heart, and the biggest place in his heart belonged to Bennett, his 7-year-old son. I know how much Curt loved Bennett, and some of his favorite times with Bennett were in Wildwood, going on rides or playing games, taking him to Nicholas Smith train store to see the train displays, or taking him to my mom and dad's to see my dad's train display. This brought him joy. I also know Curt would be happy to see so many people honoring his memory, and for that, I thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to honor him with us. As you may know, Curt struggled with addiction like many other people, young and old, for many years. This is nothing new, and it won't be something that I can provide an answer to, but I can say that shutting people out who suffer from an addiction is not the answer. There are moments I wish I could replay over and over again in my head. From those good times we had when we were children and teenagers that I would love to relive. And then there's not so good times later in life where I wish I could do something different or help in some other way. Unfortunately, I can't go back in time. All I can do is look back on Curt's life and know how important he was to everyone, especially me, and be thankful that I was able to be a part of it. And I can also look forward to honoring his memory the best I can. Curt wouldn't want anyone to cry remembering him. He'd call you a win. So stop crying once.
Thank you, Andrew. Before I give my remarks, if there's anyone in the audience that would like to say a word or two and share reflections of Curt, you're welcome to come up at this point in time. No requirement, but if there's someone, we're very happy that we had students from Curt's schools. We had friends from Curt's from Aston, from Archmere. Any of you that would like to come up. We had some actually come from one of the halfway houses that Curt worked with in his later years of life. We welcome you to come up. John?
Just want to share one memory of Curt. I'm Curt's brother-in-law, John. It was 9/11, and I was very blessed to be in Pennsylvania, welcomed by my wife and Weldon family. And so on the morning of 9/11, I was in the district attorney's office and watching as the planes were going into the buildings, and they sent us home. And they sent Curt home. And home for both of us was the Weldon's house. Had been 1 month married to my wife, Kristen. So Curt and I were outside in the driveway, and we were both devastated, very upset about what was happening in the world. And Curt picked up a basketball, and he was encouraging that we should do something to take our minds off the moment, if we could, for at least just a moment. And so we shot a few hoops, and then we stopped. And we looked up in the air, and Curt said, "John, do you hear that?" I looked back at Curt and I said yes. And there were no cars driving by. There were no lawnmowers going. There was nothing to hear. Curt and I shared a moment together, and it was a tragic moment in our world. But I was very glad to be sharing that moment with him. It's very hard to describe what that moment was like. But David Payne, who is the co-founder of 911.org, said, "In the days that followed the 9/11 attacks on America, people of all ages and from all walks of life found themselves united by an extraordinary spirit of empathy and resilience. Many Americans no longer cared about the kinds of differences that often separated us as a people, at least for a while, and instead came to realize how much we all have in common. This truly special moment of empathy and togetherness helped to reassure, comfort, and inspire an entire nation at a time of great sorrow and darkness. For many who lived through the horror of 9/11, that moment of hope has become a life-changing reminder that we are stronger as a nation when we work together." And so those comments, I think, capture how Curt and I felt in that moment together. Like I said, there was no one who perhaps I could have better spent the moment with than Curt. I'll tell you that Curt was really someone who loved America. He was an all-American kid, and I'm going to miss him. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for letting me get a couple words in here. My name is Eric Westervelt. I was a very, very close friend of Curt's in our childhood. And I've been thinking over the last few days, one of the things that struck me when I heard of his passing was the first thing, of course, comes is some type of regret. Nothing specific in my case. It wasn't one of those situations where, gosh, I wish I had done this or wish I had done that. It was something more general, the way you feel about people when you sort of lose touch with them through the years. As you grow up, it happens, and you kind of have to come to terms with that. But as I kind of gave it some more thought, I realized that in many of our lives, those of us who are fortunate enough to live for a very, very long time, people kind of come in and out a lot, even people that we hold very closely. Most people in our lives are not going to be there for your entire life. I'm really, really grateful that Curt was there for some of the formative period in my life, my young years, elementary school, middle school, into high school. We were really best of friends for a number of years, and I really, really admired Curt as a person. Obviously, he was a great friend. I want to send a big thanks out to the Weldon family in general for their just incredible generosity to me as a child. We were also very nice. My parents loved Curt as well. We took him to Disney World one year. You guys always took us to your beach house. We had some great times. Andrew, thanks for being our little punching bag when we were, we brutalized you a little bit, but I was always on board with your Star Wars thing. So I was definitely on your side with that. But no, we had some terrific times, and kind of piggybacking off of some of the things I heard some of the children say, Karen, Kristen, Tim, and Andrew, about kind of wanting that edge and to sort of stand out, not sort of live in the shadow. I always looked at you guys as a family, just no pretension whatsoever. I mean, you were just a regular, growing up, I knew, obviously Mr. Weldon, carried a long shadow in the community and stuff, and you were a very prominent family, but it never occurred to me. Now, part of that maybe is because I was young, but you guys, you were just a terrific all-American, middle-class family as far as I could be concerned. And one last little thing, because I know where the sports is sort of the theme of all this. I can vouch for obviously how big a fan or big a player Curt was. We were pretty comparable in baseball. He was a little bit of a better pitcher. I was a little bit of a better hitter. I'm going to stand by that. But we played a lot. We challenged each other a lot. He caught up to me in size, which was a little bit of a sore spot with me as well, as you guys point out. I never caught up to him in hockey. I stopped at roller hockey. He continued on with the ice hockey. It just kind of blew me away. But I will say this, with the Flyers thing, you were so spot on with the whole Goons. I forget, it was Kristen or Karen had mentioned the fights. We used to rent these VHSs from these tough guys, hockey fights guys, at the Granite Run Mall back when that was functioning. And we used to sit here for like hours on end, like a couple of dopes, just watching these things and getting in like a Bob Probert or a Dave Brown jersey. Rock and sock, and we would take the pillows and we would nail each other. Of course, we used to pick on you because you were smaller at that point. And we used to call each other. I'll leave it at this. I'll get off the stage, I promise you. Because I could go on and on. I just spoke to a guy in the Inquirer, but I had all these things to say and I just couldn't get it out. We used to literally call each other's houses in the day before cell phones. You would think of when the Flyers were going on, not when there was like a big goal or something dramatic happening, when there was a fight. And we would come on right away and we would kind of grade the situation, who won or lost that fight. So just goofy stuff and just kind of typical American kid stuff, I guess, all in all. But I really did love Curt. I didn't have a lot of friends, but the friends I did have were extremely close to me, and he is in the upper echelon of that. And I will miss him very, very dearly. And thanks again to everybody for coming out today.
Sorry if none of you can see me out there. I never grew. But yeah, I was one of the little kids from like the mostly in a weather van around them that lived around the corner, and they were the ones running through our backyards, trampling our houses. My dad literally wanted to call the cops on them. But I had just one funny thing to say. I can't figure out how to say anything but funny, but Curt kind of gave me my first unbirth-related injury to the hospital. We were playing baseball in the backyard. Don't get me wrong, it was an accident. And he was always good at sports, and I happened to be the little girl who was trying to catch a lightning bug at the same time. So I was trying to catch a lightning bug, and I accidentally walked up behind Curt, and he went to go wound up the bat, and it clocked me right in the middle of my head. So my greatest memory from him is this nice scar that I have in the middle of my forehead that goes diagonally, so he will live with me forever, pretty much. And I've always treated him as a wonderful person since then, as far as I've known. I mean, he's always been that one little happy kid around the corner that we were playing sports, and if I couldn't play good enough, at least I could watch that. It was always fun to play, and we always hated it because he was little, Andrew, but he was just a little kid playing like that. I don't know, but that's basically the most memories I have of him, and he will live, obviously, forever with me, and I'm sorry that everybody had lost a great person, and thank you all for supporting me for everything. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for coming, and thank those of you who came up to speak for saying a few words. I know Curt would be very happy and proud that you chose to come here. It's been a rough week for us. A week ago Sunday, I boarded a plane and flew 19 hours to Dubai, arriving at 8 a.m. on a Monday morning. With meetings scheduled all day, I didn't get to bed until almost midnight. At 1:07 a.m., my cell phone rang and woke me up. In a daze, I looked at the number, and I didn't recognize it, but it flashed Boyertown, and I know that's where Curt's living. Because I hadn't heard from Curt for a week, which was unusual, I answered the phone. The voice on the other end said to me, "Is this Wayne Weldon?" To which I answered yes, in a daze. "Unfortunately, Mr. Weldon, I have sad news. Your son is deceased." That's exactly how he said it to me. Your son is deceased. It felt like I was in the twilight zone. At first I didn't respond as I tried to figure out if this was a nightmare or a prank call. But as I began to ask questions of myself, I realized that my life had changed forever. The officer described how they responded to a report from Curt's neighbors that he hadn't been seen for several days, and so the landlord let them into Curt's apartment. And there, the officer told me, was Curt, sitting on the sofa, with the TV on in front of him on the sports channel, obviously, with no life in his body. The officer told me that they estimated that Curt had passed several days earlier, most likely while watching the Eagles game when they beat the Colts. Curt loves sports and had texted me a week earlier saying, "Dad, the Eagles look great this year, 2-0, new quarterback looks solid." And of course, I would always text Curt back to keep the conversation going. While Curt lived in Boyertown, we kept in contact pretty much every week. Either he would come down to our house, or I would drive up, making certain he was okay, and that he had food. He was working full-time, and then taking me to dinner or visit inside of his apartment. For the second straight night, I got no sleep. Calling Mary first, asking Kristen to go over and be with Mary when she got the call, and then calling each of the kids to give them the sad news about their brother. Now you have to understand our families. I'm the youngest of 9 in the Weldon clan, and Mary's the middle of 7 in the Gallagher clan. Our families are the same. We do things together. The parents in both families focus on the children. Everything that my parents did in their lives was focused on enabling and empowering our 9 children and giving us what they never had. Mary's family was the same. Everything that her mother and her father until he died did was to give her brothers and sisters and her the chance to enjoy things that they never had. So that was the focus of both families. And so that's what was instilled in us, that our mission in life was to serve the kids, was to do things for our children all the time. At Christmas, we still give all the kids gifts. That will never end, because that's what we feel our responsibility is. And so our family, even though I oftentimes had to travel to Washington and who knows where, in spite of my jobs, we did things together. We flew to LA when I worked for the INA. We didn't have any money back then, so we flew out on special midnight flights called red eyes. We went to a rental place called Rent-A-Wreck and rented a used car. And because I didn't have enough money except for the room that the INA was paying for, Mary and I and all 5 kids stayed in one room. 1 bedroom, 7 people. But we got to see Disneyland. We got to visit sites that we would never visit otherwise. We took the kids to 3 conventions. You've heard Andrew talk about them. Andrew and Curt always found a way to challenge Mary primarily because I was off doing other things. And Andrew told the story, but what he didn't say was Mary took the fireworks and stuffed them in the toilet to make sure he could never use them. And they didn't. In Houston, we went over to Galveston to see my friend who was the fire chief, Willie Wisco. We visited with him at his home, and we didn't have money for another room, so again, everybody stayed in one room. 1 bedroom, 7 children. On another trip to Miami, when I was giving a speech, we rented a camper and we drove down together. That was interesting because we camped out in Miami. Mary brought me over to this beautiful site, me getting out in a camper, while she went back to the kids to this, I don't know what it was, a campground. The problem was she forgot to pack clothes for the 2 boys. So that entire week, Andrew and Curt lived in their underwear. They swam in their underwear, and I think finally Mary went to one of the stores and bought them some clothes to wear. But those were the trips you remember. And we took photographs of everything. And we put them in albums when we came back home. We went to Lake Placid twice. The first time Curt got to skate on Olympic ice. And boy, that was a big deal for him. We went to Acadia National Park in Maine. We went to Moscow, to Vienna. And we went to many, many trips to D.C. You heard about the trip to the Flyers game where Karen, unfortunately because I was sexist, did not let her go into the Flyers locker room. And the reason was that Ron Hextall and Eric Lindros were walking around with no clothes on. And Andrew said to me, Dad, they're no bigger than we are, because they didn't have their gear on at that point in time. I think some of Curt's best trips might have been with Jimmy McGinn. And Jimmy's here with us today, but he's in the back because he has serious health problems. But I want to acknowledge Jim as part of our family. Jimmy had a son that was the same age as Andrew and Curt, Matthew. So Jimmy would take Andrew, Curt, Matthew, and Tommy, his nephew, to all kinds of adventures. They went to ball games, they came to D.C. on the train, they went to other places where Jimmy's prime responsibility was to teach our kids not to have manners. He taught them how to chew their food and then stick it out of their mouth so the neighbors would be offended. He taught them how to throw spitballs over the railing at the Phillies game so the people down below would wonder what's happening from above. But Jimmy has a heart of gold and always took our kids to places where they were able to experience the better things for young boys to enjoy. And everything that he did was harmless. And so Jimmy, in the back of the room, I know you're hearing us, I want to thank you. And I want to thank you for helping us with the arrangements here as we brought our family back to Aston. We lived a wonderful life in Aston. And let me say, I'm here to say this is a great town to raise your family. It's a town that we were very proud to call our home. As Mary said, all the institutions of our kids are right within walking distance of this building. From the preschool at St. James to the Dairy Queen where Jimmy McGinn got them bags of dilly bars and never paid for them because his girlfriend's brother owned the place, to Gennaro's where Curt had his first job, dishwashing but eating most of the food, while Andrew was the busboy, to the sports of Aston Valley youth programs in baseball and soccer. This was our home. And Curt was a fantastic kid. He was kind, he was caring, but he was obsessed with sports. He became obsessed at Pendelco in Northleaf, so much so that the kids joined together to push the school district to start ice hockey. And Curt played on those first few teams, and he became a star. And even though Curt didn't go to Sun Valley High School, he went to Archmere, they let Curt play on the Sun Valley team, and Andrew as well. And they were great competitors. In fact, they got involved with Al Crucetti and the Watson brothers when they petitioned the town to let them build Iceworks. Today, Iceworks is the finest ice hockey facility in this part of Pennsylvania. And Curt played a small part in helping Aston receive that complex. As Curt transitioned to Archmere, his talent for music emerged. His trumpet skills earned him honors. He played with a group called the Annex. They actually cut a CD. I still have no idea what ska music is, but that's what they played. That's what they allegedly played. Still don't know what ska is. And then Curt went to Weidman, and they would bring the typical challenges that young people face when they move out of the house for the first time. But something difficult happened on the way to Weidman, and that was Curt was diagnosed with diabetes. Even though he was 17, he was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, which you usually have from birth. Now imagine a young, active, athlete, energetic child being told, you're now going to stick yourself 5 times a day with insulin. Whether you're on a date, whether you're at school, wherever you are, this is your challenge for life. That was a hard sell to Curt, to realize that unlike his brothers and sisters, he would have to be dependent on insulin for the rest of his life. It impacted him in a very negative way. He coped with it, but it wasn't easy. As with many young people today at college, Curt got exposed to prescription drugs. OxyContin was the first drug that I remember. And coupled with diabetes, the challenge became even greater, and Curt struggled. Addiction is not only bad for the addicted, but it's devastating for the family. And we didn't know how to deal with it because we had never been experienced to it before. We all struggled as Curt fought rehab, battle after battle, but the addictive spiral got worse. The combination of diabetes and drug use clouded Curt's ability to cope with stress and make positive decisions. Because we are a close family, a negative action with one child affected every child. You saw that here today. Our kids are one and the same. They enjoy being together, whether it's at the beach on the weekend or taking a trip to Disney World or Lake Placid or wherever. They have and we have fun together. And so it was 10 years ago that Curt faced a major setback in life, caused by my job. You see, in an attempt for me to seek my 11th term in office, where I would have aspired and would have become the chairman of the Armed Services Committee, and that job has unlimited subpoena power, which meant that I could have subpoenaed any human being in America to testify under oath about national security. People in Washington became very concerned, in both parties. As a politician, I have thick skin. I could take the jabs, the unfair accusations, the unfair stories, and I had to live with that. But my kids weren't politicians. And that year, because the polls show we would have won, the attacks focused on our kids. Not one kid, but all 5 kids. There were stories written about each of my children, stupid stories, alleging that Andrew had gotten money from Boeing Company for his race car, when the team he was working for was a Boeing employee of 25 years, Tom Schaefer, who came by today. And he wasn't supported by Boeing Corporation. He was supported by the credit union of the Boeing employees. But the stories continued and continued, and the family suffered and suffered. And then, in an effort to deny at the 11th hour another victory, where I would have assumed that position, the unthinkable happened. A scumbag lawyer from Washington, and I use that term pointedly so, sent FBI agents to my daughter's house in Philadelphia at 7 o'clock in the morning, 2 weeks before my election. The agents were there with the TV cameras and the reporters already stationed outside of her home. And so they were there to take photographs because they had been given advance notice that were raiding Congressman Weldon's oldest daughter's home. They took the photographs as boxes were carried out, as my daughter and my son-in-law were humiliated. And the headlines across America screamed, "Weldon's daughter under investigation. Weldon must be under investigation." My kids were more important for my election, so I canceled the TV ads that year. I told my staff, pull the ads. I need that money in case we have to defend Karen, knowing full well she would never do anything wrong. So we stopped the ads, because helping my daughter was more important than having a TV ad in the last 2 weeks of the campaign. We all tried to cope as Karen felt unbelievable pressure. Curt couldn't handle the stress, and drugs became his outlet in a much bigger way than ever before. Amazingly, and never before stated publicly by me, those FBI agents never talked to Karen. They never called her in and asked her one question. They never called me. The whole thing was a scam to impact the election and to destroy my family. And now I'm telling the story, because the story needs to be told to America 10 years later. That hurt Curt in a way that we'll never fully know. I know as his father, he couldn't handle what occurred. A year later, by the way, the local office called Karen and said, "Would you please come get your records?" And Karen called me, I remember, and she said, "Dad, what do?" I said, "Call them back and tell them that they asked them to have the same TV cameras and reporters there that were there when they took the records from your house. This is supposed to be America, but it's not the America that we grew up in." Karen and all of us got through. One day I'll tell how it affected me personally. It's still too humiliating, but Mary knows. My kids don't, except Andrew. But Curt went off the deep end, so much so that year I had to have him arrested. A father arresting his son because the drug abuse was too strong. He was endangering himself and he was endangering the rest of the family. He was no longer the Curt that we loved. In and out of several rehabs, we struggled, but we stayed with Curt, with his burning desire to stay clean and get better, while unsuccessfully facing the demons of addiction. The spiral continued. Rehab, push him out, associate with more, rehab again and again. It became a spiral that Curt could not control. In my one-on-one meetings with Curt, he would talk about his addiction and always wanted to lick it for good. He talked incessantly about his son Bennett and Katie and how he wanted to coach him in baseball and soccer and just wanted to be a family with a home and a fence. And he wanted to take Pigletted places, which he did at every opportunity. In fact, in July, they went to see Ghostbusters. If you watch the video, you'll see Curt and Bennett on the train. In July 4th, he had him at Wildwood with all of us. He wanted Bennett to be proud of his father. All of us knew that Curt loved Bennett more than anything, and so do we. You know, an addict will do anything to suppress the crave. They'll lie, they'll cheat, they'll steal, and they'll hurt the very people who love the addict the most. But you can't let the behavior of the addict overcome the need to show love and forgiveness. And believe me, sometimes, and I've been there, well, Curt would sign checks out of my bank account or take money illegally or take something that we value. And as much as we despised his action, we could never let that transcend to Curt, the son, or the brother. You can't enable an addict, and we knew that. But you can't throw away the only hope that they have in life. Each and every human being has worth. Through this line today, one of every 3 people that came up to me told me that they had an addiction problem in their family. One of every 3. A close relative, a friend, a co-worker. The struggle to overcome addiction has got to be continually supported by family and friends, as difficult as it may be. And that's not easy when your cherished possessions are stolen and sold for drug money. Mary was a saint for Curt. He had stolen from her, lied to her, and her instincts still told her that Curt was still using. But as tough as she was, she would wash his clothes every week when he brought them down. He would prod him on his diabetes. Curt, are you taking your insulin? What are your blood sugar levels? And he would make sure he had enough food. And trying to hide it from me, she would make sure she snuck a food card or some cash into Curt's pocket before he went back to his apartment, thinking I wouldn't notice. I can't tell you how many times Curt told me how much he loved his mother and his brothers and sisters. But living with an addict means you could never give up because you are often their only rock. Their only stability in life is you. Each and every one of you knows someone someplace suffering with an addiction. What Curt would want, and he talked to me about this in May, when he told me he was becoming more depressed, is that he actually hoped that one day he could help others beat the disease. Well, today is Curt's day to do that. Our wish today, as you read in the obituary, is Curt's wish, that each and every one of you and the people that came through this line who want to honor Curt and our family in your own private way, take up the cause and support one person. We don't know who that person is. We don't need to know. You know. You won't have to look too far because all of our neighborhoods are affected with addiction. In May, we saw progress in Curt's battle. He started meeting with a local counselor that I arranged near him about his age every week. Had a couple of sports articles that were published and enthusiastically became one of 3 finalists for a job at WIP Sports Talk Radio. And boy, he was so elated. He said, "Dad, you won't believe it. I applied and they called me in. My first interview went well and they called me back, Dad, for a second interview. On that second interview, Dad, I saw Anthony Gargano and I saw these other guys that I knew through Curt, who were the stars, and they saw me in the hallway and they said, 'Curt, looks like you're going to be joining us.' And I could just hear it in his voice. Boy, if he gets this, this is his ticket, because it's what he really loves. He was one of 3 finalists for a job. I didn't hear from him about the job in July until the end. In the first week of August, he sent me a text. And the very end of the text, after he talked about the Eagles, was, "Dad, I didn't want to tell you this. I know it's a huge disappointment, Dad, but I didn't get the job at WIP. I'm sorry." And I said, immediately, I texted him back, and I still have the text. "Curt, I'm proud of you. We're all proud of you for doing so well in the process." And in one of his last texts to me, he said, "Thanks, Dad. That means a lot to me." We didn't want Curt's passing to be a sad and depressing event. As devastating as it has been to us, we wanted to let you all know that we're proud of our son, our brother, and Bennett's father, and our friend. How many times have we heard disparaging remarks about people who are druggies? Stay away, because they're harming their own lives. Do we say the same thing about people who smoke 5 packets of cigarettes a day and who are killing themselves with tobacco? Do we say the same thing about people who eat incessantly and become overweight or killing themselves with heart disease? But we call people who become addicted to drugs druggies. We can't talk about that. It's a no-no. Well, that's not what we're doing. We're proud of Curt. We acknowledge Curt's disease openly because we have never been ashamed of Curt, although we have collectively hated what addiction has done to his last years of his life. On Curt's behalf, we challenge you to take on that one person, as tough as it may be, and let them know every day that they're loved. As bad as it may hurt, hard as it may be, they need to hear that, to know that they have a support base, and that perhaps one day, if you continue working with them, they will win the battle and hopefully not lose the war. Curt didn't die last week. His heart beats in my heart, in the hearts of my kids, my wife. And most importantly, it beats in the heart of Bennett every day. Each time we hug Bennett, we need to hug a little harder because we're hugging for 2 people instead of 1. And please don't forget to hug that other person, the one that Curt is asking you today to befriend and support. That may be the hardest hug because of what drugs have done to bring out ugly behavior. But believe me, that person needs to know that you care. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for honoring Curt. Bennett, would you please come up with Papa? This is my train engineer. Bennett's the oldest grandson. He took the trains. How old were you? 3? 2? How old? No, how old were you when you started liking trains? Oh, maybe 4? Well, he likes trains. And so because of our platform, Bennett was inquisitive and is inquisitive, and he asked questions. And then before you know it, he takes the trains off the platform, is able to maintain them in their credit. He knows more about the trains than I know. He's the only person at his age that I allow to operate the trains. Right, Bennett? And he operates them all. He's my engineer. And Bennett, your dad is proud of you. I know you're proud of your dad. I want you to say hello to your dad's friends. Thank you all for coming out. Thanks, buddy. Reverend Booker, if you would come up at this point in time. Oh, before that, I'm sorry, Tim, would you play the video and then we'll close with Reverend Pastor Booker. So Tim now has done a video that I want to see for the first time.
When you try your best but you don't succeed, when you get what you want but not what you need, when you feel so tired but you can't sleep, stuck in reverse, and the tears come streaming down your face, when you lose something you can't replace, when you love someone but it goes to waste, could it be worse? Lights will guide you home and ignite your bones, and I will try to fix you. Or down below, when you're too in love to let it go, but if you never try you'll never know just what you were. Lights will guide you home and ignite your bones, and I will try to fix you. Lights will guide you home and ignite fix you. You belong among the wildflowers. You belong in a boat out at sea. Sail away, kill off the hours. You belong somewhere you feel free. Run away, find you a lover. Go away somewhere all bright and new. I have seen no other who compares with you. You belong among the wildflowers. You belong in a boat out at sea. You belong with your love on your arm. You belong somewhere you feel free. Run away, go find a lover. Run away, let your heart be your guide. You deserve the deepest of cover. You belong in that home by and by. You belong among the wildflowers. You belong somewhere close to me, far away from your trouble and worry. You belong somewhere you feel free. You belong somewhere you feel free.
Let us pray. Almighty God, your love never fails us, and you can turn the shadow of death into daybreak. Help us to receive your word with believing hearts, so that confident in your promises we may have hope and be lifted out of sorrow into the joy and peace of your presence. Through Jesus Christ, our Savior and Lord. Amen.